You're listening to Trek FM.
Hello and welcome to From There to Here, Trek FM's daily rewatch of Star Trek, where we look at every single episode in the history of the franchise from beginning to end. I'm Mike.
I'm Melissa.
And today we're talking about 2 episodes of Deep Space Nine, Fascination, and Past Tense Part 1. So let's get started with Fascination. This is the episode where Lwaxana Troi comes onto the station, and she's got a little bit of a thing for Odo, and she's also feeling a bit under the weather or something like that, and suddenly everyone else on the station starts falling madly in love with the random people who they walk by, and hijinks ensue. So, what do you think about Fascination?
I did not care for it too much. I think it's interesting because we just watched the panel or listened to the panel with Ira Steven Behr. One of the questions that came up was, why were there not more Ferengi episodes? And he mentioned how normally they were more comic episodes, and then the writers on there just didn't do comedy too well.
The directors.
Yeah. And I feel like this is kind of one of those things where they try to have like a comedic episode, and to me, just didn't really work. It wasn't really funny. I mean, I guess it was trying to be funny, but it just didn't really fit. I guess one of the things I like about Deep Space Nine is how dark it is, and this comic relief wasn't really necessary. The episode was really about Lwaxana's disease and something that Bazids have, and that how it's projected onto other people. And I don't really think I learned anything about any of the main species or characters from Deep Space Nine from this episode. So I guess I really didn't feel like it was at all a help on the Deep Space Nine storyline. I do understand its placement, though, like after watching the next episode that we talk about, because this one was kind of like a light episode, and then the next couple episodes are so heavy. So, I mean, I do see the need of adding something like this that's a little bit more like relax and kind of like, I don't know, just kind of lighten the load.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. You talked about how Ira Steven Behr was not sure that they should be doing comedic episodes because they didn't have any directors who were really good at comedy. And, it was interesting, like, hearing him in this panel talking about that and saying, like, if he were to do it again, he would do less comedy. Where to me, like...
Or less Ferengi episodes, he said.
Less Ferengi episodes because, they weren't good at comedy. And to me, like, the solution for that would be get a director who is good at comedy, Like, whenever you have a Ferengi episode, that's when you call up, Barry Sonnenfeld and have him come in and direct an episode or whatever. I guess I didn't quite understand that logic, but regardless, this didn't work for me.
But do you feel like they need more comedy in Deep Space Nine? Because I don't feel like that at all. I mean, I can see why something like this is nice every once in a while, but I think the story, what makes it great is how realistic it is, and that's kind of what life is.
I mean, I think one of the strong points of Deep Space Nine is that it could be everything, and I think that a lot of the comedy does work. I mean, you look at Trials and Tribbleations, which may be the best episode of the show, and that's essentially a comic episode. And I mean, if you look at something like X-Files as a model, where you can have like the most horrific stuff you've ever seen on television one week, and then the next week it would be the goofiest screwball comedy you've ever seen on television, and you could balance the two, or incorporate the two into a single episode. I mean, I think that it's certainly doable, and I think that Deep Space Nine does it better than most Star Trek series, so I don't think that they should have gotten rid of the comedy episodes, but I could see, the concerns and the desire to maybe bring someone in who was better suited to that then, the people who they have directing who are, really, really good at drama, maybe not so much at comedy.
And for all purposes, I mean, it's not like this is a terrible episode. It doesn't really fit in with the whole Deep Space Nine. I mean, it's not, if it was maybe another series or something else, I don't see the point.
It's completely disposable. When I watch
exactly.
it, I'm
That's
just
a good
kind
way.
of like, not that it's terrible, but
It's
I'm
not
just
terrible.
like, why are we doing this? Why are we here? This is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's not terrible. Well, I wouldn't say that much, but it's not terrible, but it's definitely not needed except to kind of balance such a heavy follow-up episode.
Which is fine, and I can see that, throwing that in between two pretty, heavy episodes or whatever, but I don't know. I think that they could have, it's hard. 26 episodes a season is ridiculous, and you're going to end up with some duds just because you need to fill the time. And all right, so let's move on to Past Tense Part 1. Now, this is the episode where the Defiant goes back to Earth, and Sisko and Bashir and Dax beam down to Earth to find that it is not how they left it. And in fact, they are in the early part of the 21st century, and they are in San Francisco, and things are bad. There are sort of like internment camps for homeless people, and they don't have any IDs on them or anything. And because of this, Sisko and Bashir are put into an internment camp, and Dax is rescued by a Steve Jobs-style billionaire, and they need to figure out a way to get out without contaminating the timeline. And also, they realize that this is right before the Bell Riots, which are a turning point in the 21st century, in which humanity starts to realize that the path that they're on may not be the greatest, and the way that they're treating the less fortunate people in society may be a reflection on their state as a society.
Well, it's interesting because it's not only like all of humanity that is doing this, but they don't even realize. There are people who don't realize that this is happening, which is, it's always amazing on how Star Trek is able to predict what's going to happen, or even the way they comment on what is happening at the time. And I think this episode's a good example of, talk about so many different things that you can relate to, and how society kind of puts people into this like group and kind of stereotypes. And you see that with this episode. For example, they talk about how the people in the camps, some of them just need to be in a hospital. They're not getting the proper treatment. And you see that, with homeless people all the time who are probably schizophrenic, who just aren't able or can't get the medication they need, with depression, which is probably, maybe I'm stretching it, but it's still that idea where society is not recognizing these disorders or these illnesses and giving people the proper care that they need. They just say, okay, well, it's happening. What are we going to do about it? There are things we can do about it. Even in this episode, the doctor talks about just simple medications that can cure the schizophrenic that he walks past. But no one cares enough to do anything because, where is that money going to come from? You know what I mean? So those are the problems that you can see now.
Yeah, as far as the social commentary or whatever, you're absolutely right. I think they talk about in the Deep Space Nine companion that, shortly after this episode aired, there was actually a story in the newspaper about a politician who wanted to set up these types of like internment camps for for homeless people, which is, insane. But yeah, you watch this episode now and you're like, oh my God, this is like ripped from the headlines, and the idea that there are these riots which started because of, the need for change in society, and that, those riots were like a turning point. That's, very similar to stuff which is going on now. And it's kind of crazy how they were able to predict what happened. And maybe it's one of those things where they didn't really predict what happened. It's just that this is a cycle which keeps on happening, and, we're just in it again. And it's, unfortunately very evergreen.
Did you want to talk about how it's interesting how Bashir and Cisco are the ones who are caught, and Jadzia is rescued by the knight in shining armor? I wonder if that was done on purpose, like that.
I imagine that it was, the idea that, the two, minorities were the ones who were, sent to the camps, and the white woman was, rescued by the rich billionaire. There are very few things on Deep Space Nine which I feel are unintentional when it comes to that sort of, social commentary. And I think that this is one of those things which was very, very deliberate on the part of the writers. This episode was written by Robert Hewitt Wolfe, I believe, but it was really a group effort, because the second part, I think, was written by Bear. And it's really interesting to kind of look at it and all of the things. It's a very layered episode. There's a lot to think about, and I can't wait for part 2. All right, so I guess that's pretty much it for these 2 episodes. Melissa, you're still off the grid.
I'm off the grid. I need to get on social media, but I'm not really on there.
Okay, all right.
So leave a comment somewhere.
Yeah, you can contact me on social media and tell me, and I'll get the message to her.
Okay. That's really sad.
Well, hey, get your Twitter handle up there and all that good stuff. In the meantime, you can contact me at Mumbles3K, or you can also listen to me every week on Stage 9, where John Mills and I talk about the work of Star Trek creators. And the 2 of us will be back tomorrow for one more episode where we talk about Past Tense Part 2, and we start up Voyager with Caretaker.